Why did no one notice her when she slid out from beneath the jet, until the laughter stopped? The Nevada sun pressed down like a hand that didn't care who you were. It bleached the flight line until the world shimmered, metal and heat folding into each other. Engines roared, fuel burned, and beneath an F-16's belly, half hidden in shadow, Staff Sergeant Sofia Rivera tightened a wrench with slow, practiced turns. The voices came easy for them, too easy. "Careful, grease monkey," someone said. "If you ever touch a real stick, I'll call the medics myself." Laughter bounced off hangar walls, loose, casual, certain. Sophia didn't look up. Oil streaked her sleeves. Sweat ran into her eyes. Her knuckles bore old scars from sharp edges and rushed fixes no one remembered once the jet flew clean. She let the sound pass through her like wind through fencing. She learned early that arguing wasted energy. Machines didn't care about opinions. They only responded to attention, patience, and respect. She gave them all three. Nearby, a group of pilots lounged in the thin shade, helmets at their feet, confidence worn like an extra rank. One of them, tall, immaculate, smiling too easily, tapped his soda can against his thigh. "Month's pay," he said. "Rivera never hears her call sign on tower comms, not unless it's to fetch coffee." No one challenged him. Sophia felt her jaw tighten once, then she turned the wrench again. At 27, she was smaller than most, 5'2" on good days, easy to miss, easier to underestimate. The kind of person people talked around instead of to. That was fine. This was her world, metal, torque, tolerances. The quiet truth that if she did her job right, everyone else got to feel brave. Footsteps approached, not the lazy shuffle of pilots but the precise crunch of authority. Colonel Morrison stopped near her work area, his shadow cutting across the fuselage. His uniform looked pressed hard enough to draw blood. His eyes moved the way inspectors' eyes did, measuring, weighing, discarding. Sophia slid out from beneath the jet and rose to attention. "And you are?" he asked, flat as a checklist. "Staff Sergeant Rivera, sir." His gaze lingered, too long. "Why is someone like you working on critical systems for an F-16? He asked. "This isn't a motorcycle repair shop." "I'm lead technician on this airframe, sir. Post-flight inspection on the flap actuator system." He didn't respond. Instead, his eyes dropped to her open toolbox, to the black, leather-bound book tucked carefully inside. He picked it up. She felt the shift instantly, the tightening in her chest, the instinct to reach for it and the discipline not to. "My civilian flight log," she said quietly, "sir." He flipped through it, pages filled with early mornings, double shifts, hours logged in ink that had cost her sleep, money, and every spare moment, a private climb built when no one was watching. He closed the book. "Mechanics shouldn't pretend to be pilots," he said, tucking it under his arm. "This stays with me." Something inside her cracked, not loudly, not visibly, just enough to remind her she was human. "Get back to work." The sabotage didn't announce itself. It never does. A tool missing here, a maintenance report misplaced there. Grit poured into her water bottle, small things, careful things, the kind meant to exhaust, not explode. By the second week, she'd become a lesson, a warning. New airmen glanced at her like she represented an invisible boundary they didn't want to cross. She ate alone, worked late, walked the perimeter fence at night while jets slept under floodlights. She told herself it didn't matter. She told herself to endure. But some nights, alone in her quarters, she stared at the empty space where her logbook should have been and wondered how long persistence could survive without hope. And then came the sound she couldn't ignore. It was early, the light sharp, the air still holding the night's chill. Sophia stood near Hangar 6 when she heard it, a metallic snap too fast, too careless. A pilot rushed through his pre-flight inspection on Falcon 415, movement sloppy, confident. When he reached the wing route, He tested the flap actuator with unnecessary force. The sound carried. A faint, ugly clack. Her stomach dropped. She knew that noise, fatigue under stress, metal asking for mercy it wouldn't get. "Captain," she said, already moving, "hold up." He looked down at her, irritation clear. "It's fine, Sergeant, I followed procedure." "I heard the actuator pop under load," she said. "That's not normal. With respect, you're not cleared to reinspect my aircraft. If that actuator fails mid-flight, you won't be worrying about clearance." Colonel Morrison stepped in before the argument could breathe. "Return to your post," he said, "now." She obeyed. From Hangar 6, she watched Falcon 415 taxi out. Sunlight flashed across its canopy. Afterburners roared. The jet leapt into the sky. Her hands shook. That afternoon, the routine fractured. A silence where a tower update should have been. Then a voice, tight, clipped. "Eagle-7, repeat, confirm status." Sophia froze. Static followed, broken words. "Flap control, negative response, fuel." She was already moving. She didn't ask permission. She grabbed her toolkit and ran for the tower, slipping through maintenance corridors she knew better than most people knew their own homes. Inside the communications room, status lights flickered like a failing heartbeat. One glance told her everything. A me-seated cable, scorched shielding, a backup system starved of stability. "Kill power to the backup module," she said. "That'll drop the last comm link." "It's already useless. Give me 30 seconds." She worked fast, clean, certain. When power returned, the hiss of dead air changed. "Tower, this is Eagle-7." Sophia didn't stop walking. In the tower cabin, tension cracked the air. Morrison turned as she reached for a headset. "You're out of line. You want him down alive or not?" Silence. She put the headset on. "Eagle-7, this is Thunderbolt Tower. I've worked on your aircraft. You've got a flap actuator failure. I'm going to walk you through the manual override." The pilot's breathing was ragged, fuel critical, controls unresponsive. She guided him slowly, carefully, every instruction weighted with consequence. The jet came in fast, too fast, nose high, engine screaming. At the last 100 meters, the tail hook dropped. The cable caught. The jet stopped. The room erupted. Sophia removed the headset and walked out before anyone could say her name. Later in the debrief, the pilot stood before them all. "I'm alive because Staff Sergeant Rivera knew my aircraft better than I did. He recommended her for commendation, for officer training." That evening, Morrison returned her logbook. "I was wrong," he said. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Training was brutal, precise, unforgiving. She thrived. Not because she was fearless, but because she listened, adjusted, learned. When engines failed, she compensated. When formations broke, she stabilized them. When systems glitched, she didn't panic. She diagnosed. Quietly. Weeks later, new bars rested on her collar. She stood at the edge of the runway that night, stars low over the desert, jets rumbling in the distance. She thought of every small cut meant to push her out, every moment she'd almost believed them. The world hadn't changed. She had. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Why did the silence feel heavier after the laughter stopped, like the bass itself was waiting for her to break? The days that followed settled into a rhythm that looked ordinary from the outside. Jets launched, jets returned, checklists were signed, fuel trucks rolled, but for Sophia Rivera something invisible had shifted. The jokes didn't disappear. They sharpened, became quieter, more precise, like hands learning where to press. She felt it the first morning her toolbox wasn't where she'd left it. Not missing, just moved. 5 meters down the line, close enough to be plausible, far enough to send a message. She dragged it back without a word. The second time it was a torque wrench. Calibrated, personal, gone for 3 hours. Returned later, leaning against a wall like it had never left. She checked it anyway, twice. Machines didn't forgive assumptions. By the end of the week, she stopped counting. Maintenance reports she filed vanished from the system, forcing her to redo inspections under time pressure. Someone swapped her gloves for a size too big. Someone loosened the cap on her canteen and let sand grit the water until it tasted like rust and heat. Small things, careful things. Things designed to make her tired. She told herself it wasn't personal, that it was just the way places like this tested people who didn't fit neatly into their expectations. Still, when she sat alone at a metal table during chow, the noise of the room washing around her, she felt something unfamiliar creep in beneath the discipline. Doubt. Not about her skills, never that. About whether endurance was enough. At night, she walked the perimeter fence. It was a habit she'd picked up when sleep wouldn't come. The desert cooled quickly after sunset, the heat bleeding out of the ground like a held breath finally released. Floodlights painted the parked F-16s in stark white and shadow, their silhouettes sharp against the dark. She liked them best like this, quiet, honest, no egos, no voices. She would stop sometimes and rest a hand against the cool skin of a jet, feeling the faint vibration still lingering from the day's flights. Every panel, every fastener. She knew where stress liked to hide. She knew which components failed slowly and which failed all at once. And she knew, with an uncomfortable certainty, that no one was listening to her anymore. Colonel Morrison had made that clear without saying it outright. She saw him occasionally on the line, his presence subtle but absolute. He never addressed her directly again, never acknowledged her work. When she briefed findings through proper channels, they were met with delays, questions that looped back on themselves, requests for additional verification that went nowhere. It was easier, she realized, to erase her than confront what she represented. The logbook stayed gone. That hurt more than she expected. It wasn't just paper. It was proof of mornings before dawn, of scraped-together money, of borrowed hours stolen between shifts. It was her reminder that she hadn't imagined the path she was on. Without it, the future felt theoretical, fragile. One afternoon, while rechecking an avionics bay under punishing heat, she caught her reflection in the polished curve of the fuselage. Grease-streaked, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, jaw set too tight. For the first time in years, a thought crossed her mind she didn't like. What if they're right? She shut it down immediately, forced herself to breathe. One task at a time, one bolt, one system. That was how she'd survived before. It would be how she survived now. The morning everything changed didn't announce itself with drama. It began with routine. Sophia was assigned to Hangar 6, a place that smelled permanently of fuel and hot metal. She worked methodically, checking a series of post-maintenance items, her mind steady despite the low thrum of tension that had become her baseline. That's when she heard it. Not loud, not obvious. Wrong. The metallic snap cut through the background noise with surgical precision. Too sharp, too fast. It carried the kind of meaning only someone who lived inside systems would recognize. She looked up. Falcon 415 sat on the line, its skin catching the early sun. A young pilot moved around it, checklist flipping too quickly, motions confident but rushed. He reached the wing root and tested the flap actuator with unnecessary force. The sound came again. Her chest tightened. That actuator had been serviced the previous day. She signed off on its tolerances herself. She knew its limits, and she knew what happened when fatigue met impatience. Her rag hit the concrete before she realized she dropped it. "Captain," she said, already walking, "hold up." He barely slowed. "It's fine. I need to take another look at that actuator." He frowned. I followed procedure. I heard it pop under load, she said. That's not normal. The word pop hung between them like a live wire. With respect, he replied, irritation flaring, you're not cleared to reinspect my aircraft. Sophia felt the familiar spike of frustration, but beneath it something colder, fear. If that part fails in flight, she said evenly, you won't get a second chance to argue procedure. He opened his mouth to respond. Colonel Morrison's presence closed the space like a door slamming shut. What's the issue? Morrison asked, already impatient. Nothing, sir, the pilot said quickly. Just about to taxi. Sophia met the colonel's eyes. Sir, I believe there's a defect in the flap actuator. I'm requesting clearance to reinspect. Morrison didn't hesitate. Denied, return to your post. The dismissal was absolute. Sophia stood there for half a second longer than regulation allowed, long enough to feel the weight of every night she'd spent keeping these aircraft alive, long enough to understand exactly what was happening. Then she stepped back. From Hangar 6, she watched Falcon 415 taxi out. The canopy reflected the sky. The engine whined, then roared. Heat rippled behind it as the afterburner lit. The jet lifted cleanly into the air. Her stomach twisted. She didn't move for a long time. The base carried on. Another launch, another checklist, another routine that pretended nothing was wrong. But Sophia couldn't shake the sound. She replayed it in her head over and over, cataloging possibilities. Fatigue fracture, hydraulic lag, stress response under asymmetric load. None of them ended well. She tried to tell herself that pilots flew aircraft with minor issues all the time. That redundancy existed for a reason, that she was catastrophizing. Still, her hands trembled when she reached for her water bottle and tasted grit. The afternoon wore on, the sun climbed, radios crackled with routine chatter. Then there was a pause. Just a fraction too long. She looked up as the tower frequency shifted. Eagle-7 confirmed status. No immediate response. Sophia felt it before she heard it, the tightening in the air, the subtle way attention focused. Static followed, broken fragments. Flap control, negative response. Her heart dropped. She didn't wait. She moved. Every step toward the tower felt inevitable, like something set in motion long before this moment. She cut through maintenance corridors, badge flashing, boots pounding concrete. Her mind was already inside the systems, tracing lines, mapping failures. In the communications room, she took one look at the flickering backup array and knew. Unstable power, intermittent signal, a problem that hid until everything else went wrong. A nearby technician started to protest. Kill power to the backup module, Sophia said. That'll drop the last comm link. It's already dying, she replied. Give me 30 seconds. She worked fast, not rushed. There was a difference. Fresh cable, clean seating, no hesitation. When the system came back online, the hiss of static shifted. Tower, this is Eagle-7. Sophia exhaled once. She didn't know yet if it would be enough. But for the first time in weeks, someone was listening. And far above the desert, a pilot was running out of options. Why did her hands stay steady when everything else inside her was screaming to stop? The voice coming through the speakers didn't sound like confidence. It sounded like control held together by discipline and fear in equal measure. Sophia recognized it immediately, not the pilot, but the tone, the sound of someone counting seconds they didn't have. Tower, this is Eagle-7, do you copy? The communications room felt too small all at once. Consoles hummed, screens glowed, people leaned closer without realizing they were moving. The base, moments ago wrapped in routine, had tilted into something sharp and fragile. Sophia stood frozen for half a breath. Then she stepped forward. "I've got him," she said, already reaching for a spare headset. Colonel Morrison turned, his expression hardening the instant he saw her. "Staff Sergeant Rivera, you are not authorized." "You want him talking," she said quietly, "or disappearing off your radar." The words landed heavier than she intended, or maybe exactly as heavy. Morrison hesitated, just long enough for her to slide the headset on. "Eagle-7," she said, voice calm, measured. "This is Thunderbolt Tower. I have you on partial. Do you read?" A pause. Static crackled like dry leaves. "Copy barely," the pilot replied. His breathing was audible now, too fast, too shallow. "Controls are sluggish, flaps aren't responding, fuel's dropping faster than expected." Sophia closed her eyes for half a second, not in prayer, in focus. "I'm Staff Sergeant Sophia Rivera," she said. "I worked on your aircraft. I believe you've got a flap actuator failure with primary hydraulics compromised." Silence followed, then disbelief edged with desperation. "Your maintenance." "Yes," she said, "and right now that's what you need." She could feel eyes on her, some skeptical, some hopeful, some afraid of what it meant to let her continue. She ignored them all. "Listen carefully," she said. "We're going to bypass the primary system. There's a manual override, red lever auxiliary flap release. It's a two-stage action." "I've never used it," the pilot said. "I know," she replied. "That's why I'm here." The desert stretched endlessly beneath Eagle-7, flat and unforgiving. At 18,000 feet, the jet was stable enough to lie, stable enough to pretend nothing was wrong. Sophia refused to let him believe it. "Push the lever forward," she said. "Hold it for 3 seconds, count it out loud. 1, 2, 3. Release, now check response." A pause, then. "I've got partial movement." Sophia's chest loosened just a fraction. "Good," she said. "That's enough. Now we manage energy. You're coming in fast but controlled. Bring speed down in increments. Don't fight the jet, work with it." Wind shear warnings flashed on the tower display. The room murmured. Morrison leaned in despite himself. "Secondary runway," Sophia said without looking away. "Primary too risky. We'll take the arrestor cable." "You'll overshoot," someone muttered. "Not if he listens," she replied. The pilot did. His breathing slowed as instructions replaced panic. Every adjustment was small, deliberate, the kind of flying that felt less like commanding a machine and more like negotiating with it. Sophia stayed with him through every second. "Altitude check. Confirmed. Speed. Dropping." She imagined the actuator as she'd seen it that morning, the stress line forming. The moment it protested, she adjusted her guidance accordingly, compensating for what the jet could no longer do on its own. The runway came into view. "Too fast, too steep." "Keep the nose high," she said. "Trust the hook." The F-16 screamed over the threshold. At the last 100 meters, the tail hook dropped. The sound echoed through the tower like a gunshot. The cable caught. Metal shrieked. The jet shuddered violently, momentum bleeding away in a brutal instant. Then, stillness. "T-Tower," the pilot said, breath hitching. "Eagle-7 down safe." The room erupted. Applause, shouts. Someone laughed in relief. Someone else wiped their face. Sophia didn't move. She removed the headset slowly, as if afraid the moment would shatter if she rushed it. Her hands were steady. Her knees were not. She turned and walked toward the stairwell before anyone could stop her. In the quiet of the tower corridor, the adrenaline hit her all at once. Her legs trembled. Her chest burned. She pressed a hand to the wall and waited until the world steadied. She hadn't saved a hero. She'd done her job. That night the base buzzed with retold versions of the landing. Details grew larger. Voices grew louder. The story shifted shape as stories always do when fear fades. Sophia avoided all of it. She returned to Hangar 6 and worked until her fingers ached, rechecking systems no one had asked her to touch. It was how she grounded herself, proof that she still belonged to something real. Near midnight, footsteps echoed behind her. She turned to see the pilot, Captain Martinez, standing awkwardly a few paces away, flight suit unzipped at the collar, helmet tucked under his arm. "They told me where to find you," he said. She nodded once. "You should be resting." "I will," he replied, "after I say this." He hesitated, then stepped closer. "I didn't hear you this morning. On the flight line, that's on me." Sophia didn't respond. "When things started going wrong up there," he continued, "I thought I was done. I really did. Then your voice came through, and suddenly I wasn't alone." He swallowed. "You didn't just know the system," he said. "You knew me, how much I could push, when to stop." She met his eyes then, saw something like humility there, and gratitude unburdened by pride. "I'm alive because of you," he said simply. She nodded again. "You flew the jet." "I flew it because you gave me a way to." The next morning, the debrief room was full. Sophia stood at the back, hands clasped, eyes forward. She expected to be invisible again. That would have been easier. Captain Martinez spoke first. "Eagle-7 launched for a routine training sortie," he said. "Mid-flight, I lost primary flap control and communications. Fuel was critical. Options were limited." He paused. Then Staff Sergeant Sofia Rivera came on the channel. Every head turned. She identified the failure, guided me through a manual override I'd never used, and brought me home. Morrison's face was unreadable. "I've submitted a formal recommendation," Martinez continued, "for the Air Force Commendation Medal, and for her immediate entry into officer training." The room murmured. Sophia felt something unfamiliar rise in her chest. Not pride. Relief. That evening, a knock came at her quarters. Colonel Morrison stood there, her logbook in his hands. "I was wrong," he said. "My judgment was flawed." She took the book without a word. "You'll report to training at 800, he added. After he left, Sophia sat on her bunk and opened the logbook, ran her fingers over the pages. For the first time in weeks, the future didn't feel fragile. It felt earned. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the exhaustion and the scars, something quiet and steady took root. Hope. What did it feel like to be given a chance after spending so long preparing for one believed you deserved? The training field didn't welcome anyone. It tolerated them. Scorched asphalt stretched beneath a white, unforgiving sky. Prefab classrooms rattled in the wind. The control tower was skeletal, stripped of ceremony, all function and no comfort. This wasn't a place for inspiration. It was a place where excuses went to die. Sophia stood at the edge of the tarmac in a fresh flight suit that still felt unfamiliar against her skin. The fabric was clean, too clean. The weight of the helmet under her arm was heavier than she'd imagined, not physically, but in what it represented. She wasn't invisible here. She wasn't protected either. Around her, other candidates checked straps and traded confident remarks. Some glanced at her with open curiosity, others with polite dismissal. She recognized the look immediately. It wasn't hostility. It was doubt wrapped in indifference. That was harder to fight. The instructor's voice cut across the line, sharp and efficient. "Mount up." Sophia climbed into the T-38, the cockpit swallowing her in a cocoon of switches and gauges. As the canopy lowered, the outside world narrowed. The noise softened. The scent of electronics and fuel grounded her. She exhaled. This space made sense. "Rivera," the instructor's voice crackled in her headset. "Pattern flight, standard takeoff, precision landing." "Copy," she replied, voice steady. The jet rolled, accelerated, lifted. The ground fell away, and with it, the weight she'd been carrying for years loosened. not because it disappeared, but because it finally had somewhere to go. Halfway through the pattern, the instructor spoke again. Calm, casual. Engine failure, respond. There was no warning tone, no drama, just words. Sophia didn't hesitate. Throttle back, rudder compensate, trim adjust. She felt the aircraft respond, not instantly but honestly. The nose dipped, speed stabilized. She breathed. Talk me through it, the instructor said. Maintaining glide, she replied. Adjusting for wind, setting up for short field landing. The runway rushed up faster than it should have. She touched down firm but centered, rolled to a stop with less than 100 feet to spare. Silence filled the cockpit. Then acceptable. It wasn't praise. It was better. By the third week, exhaustion had burned away pretense. The candidates moved differently now, quieter, more deliberate. Confidence where it existed was earned moment by moment. Sophia learned their rhythms the way she'd learned aircraft, by watching where they strained, where they compensated, where they broke. She noticed who rushed checklists and who respected them, who panicked when simulations turned ugly, who froze. And she noticed how often people watched her when they thought she wasn't looking. During formation drills, 4 aircraft moved as one organism. When lead took a simulated hit and hesitated, Sophia didn't wait for orders. She rolled into position, adjusted spacing, lined up the target. Rivera, the instructor, snapped. You're out of sequence. Copy, she replied, correcting. The strike landed clean. Afterward, no one mentioned it, but the glances shifted, subtle, recalibrating. Late one evening, she sat alone on the steps outside the barracks, helmet at her feet, watching the sky fade from orange to bruised purple. Her muscles ached. Her mind replayed mistakes on a loop. She thought of the hangar, of the nights spent fixing problems no one else saw, of the sound that actuator made when it failed. She wondered briefly if she'd traded one kind of isolation for another. Then the instructor approached, hands in pockets. You fly like a mechanic, he said. Her chest tightened. Sir. You listen to the aircraft, he continued. Most pilots tell it what to do, you ask. He nodded once and walked away. It was the closest thing to approval she'd ever needed. The final evaluation came without ceremony. A modified test platform, unfamiliar controls, a system designed to confuse more than test. Mid-flight, warning indicators flickered, intermittent actuator signal loss. Sophia felt the old tension coil in her chest. Not fear. Recognition. She ran diagnostics, isolated the fluctuation, adjusted manually. The aircraft fought her for a moment, then settled. She landed clean. In the briefing room, the instructor slid a small box across the table. Staff Sergeant Sophia Rivera, he said, welcome to the officer corps. She didn't open the box right away. She thought of the logbook, of the long way here, of every voice that said no. Then she did. The ceremony was brief, functional, no speeches. On the flight line, with an F-35 climbing overhead, Captain Martinez pinned the new bars to her collar. Lieutenant, he said, you've got lead next month, joint exercise. She met his eyes. I won't waste it. He smiled. I know. That night, Sophia walked to the far end of the runway where the lights thinned and the desert pressed close. Stars hung low, sharp and indifferent. She thought about dignity, about how it wasn't loud, how it didn't announce itself. It just showed up. Tomorrow the path would stretch beyond the runway into the sky, uncertain, unforgiving. She turned back toward the hangars. There was always work to do. Why did the weight feel heavier now that she finally wore the bars she'd fought so hard to earn? Lead came faster than she expected. 1 month wasn't enough time to feel ready. It never was. But readiness, she'd learned, was a story people told themselves after the fact. What mattered was preparation, and the quiet honesty to know where your limits lived. Sophia stood in the briefing room while the joint exercise map glowed against the wall. Blue and red overlays, air corridors, threat envelopes, the kind of complexity designed not to overwhelm machines but people. She listened more than she spoke. The other pilots talked in confident shorthand, voices overlapping, experience rubbing against ego. They'd flown together before, shared call signs, inside jokes. She was the variable. Lead. She felt it in the way eyes drifted to her and away again, in the subtle recalculations happening behind composed faces. No one challenged the assignment outright. That would have been unprofessional. Instead, they waited for her to prove she could carry the weight without dropping it on them. Eagle flight, the commander said, pointing to the screen. You'll ingress low, pop up here, engage, then egress fast. Simulated SAM threat, degraded comms. Assume something will go wrong. Sophia nodded. It always did. On the flight line before launch, she walked the length of her aircraft slowly, not because she had to, because it centered her. Panels, fasteners, surfaces that told stories if you listened closely enough. A younger pilot, call sign Hawk, watched her from a few steps away. You always do that? He asked. Do what? Walk it like that, like you're talking to it. She paused, considered. I'm listening, she said. He frowned, then nodded, unsure why the answer felt right. Engines roared, canopy sealed, the world narrowed. Eagle flight, check in, she said once airborne. Eagle-2 green. Eagle-3 green. Hawk Eagle-4 green. 4 voices, all waiting for the fifth thing, certainty. Sophia felt the old familiar calm settle in, the kind that only came when variables aligned and the noise fell away. Ingress on my mark, she said. Keep spacing tight, don't chase perfection, fly what you have. They descended into the terrain-hugging approach, the desert rushing beneath them in blurred shades of brown and shadow. The exercise simulated electronic interference. Comms fuzzed at the edges, just enough to force discipline. Halfway to the objective, her systems flagged an anomaly. Not catastrophic, not obvious. Intermittent actuator, signal fluctuation. Her breath caught. For a split second, she was back on the flight line. The sound, the warning she hadn't been allowed to finish. She forced herself to stay present. Eagle flight, she said calmly. I've got a minor control irregularity, maintaining lead, continue profile. You want to hand it off? Eagle-2 asked. No, she replied, I've got it. And she did. She adjusted inputs manually, compensating without overcorrecting. The aircraft resisted, then complied, like a stubborn partner finally agreeing to compromise. The pop-up maneuver came fast. Mark, she said. They climbed, targets painted, simulated fire exchanged. Then the exercise escalated, as it was designed to. Hawk, you're hit, the controller's voice crackled. Simulated damage, limited maneuverability. Hawk's breathing spiked in Sophia's headset. Controls are sluggish. Sophia didn't think. She acted. Hawk, stabilize, match my altitude, don't fight it, we're adjusting the plan. Command will. I'm lead, she said, not sharp, not loud, just certain, and we're bringing everyone home. She rerouted them, trimming exposure, balancing speed and altitude with the same instincts she'd once used on the ground, knowing what systems could tolerate and which ones needed mercy. The exercise clock ticked down. They crossed the egress point intact. Eagle flight terminate, the controller said. Mission complete. Only then did Sophia realize how hard her heart was pounding. Back on the ground, engines cooling, the adrenaline drained out of her in a slow, disorienting wave. She sat in the cockpit longer than necessary, helmet resting against the canopy, breathing through the aftershock. Lead didn't feel triumphant. It felt lonely. In the debrief room, the room buzzed with post-mission energy. Data replayed, decisions dissected. Someone laughed at a near miss. Then the commander turned to her. "Lieutenant Rivera," he said, "walk us through your call when Eagle-4 took damage." Every eye settled on her. She spoke carefully, not defensively, not boastfully. "I assessed the system limitations and adjusted the profile to minimize additional stress," she said. "The priority was aircraft integrity and pilot safety, even if it meant deviating from the original objective." "Yes, sir." A pause. Then the commander nodded. "That's command judgment." Hawk met her gaze afterward, something like relief written plainly on his face. "Thanks," he said quietly. "I was about to make it worse." "You didn't," she replied. "You listened." That night Sophia returned to the runway's edge, the same place she'd stood weeks before as a newly minted officer. The sodium lights hummed softly. The desert breathed. She thought about how leadership wasn't about being the loudest voice in the room, or the most flawless pilot. It was about knowing when to push and when to protect. Her communicator buzzed. A short message from command. "Outstanding judgment today. Keep flying like that." She closed her eyes for a moment and let the words settle, not as validation, but as responsibility. Tomorrow there would be another mission, another set of variables, another chance to get it wrong. She turned back toward the hangars. Because dignity, she'd learned, wasn't proven once. It was proven again and again, every time the pressure returned, and you chose to act with care anyway. Why did the quiet feel louder than any alarm once the mission was over, and no one was watching anymore? The runway was empty when Sophia stepped onto it before dawn. No engines, no radios, no voices layered over one another trying to sound certain. Just the low hum of lights and the soft push of wind across concrete that had seen more endings and beginnings than anyone cared to count. She liked it this way. After lead, after the exercise, after the congratulations that came wrapped in professionalism instead of celebration, she found herself waking earlier than necessary, as if part of her still believed something might break if she wasn't there to notice it first. She walked the length of the runway slowly, hands tucked into the pockets of her jacket. The desert sky was pale, undecided, hovering between night and morning. It reminded her of herself, not the woman she was becoming, but the one she'd been when everything felt provisional. When she reached the far end, she stopped and looked back. From here, the base looked smaller, manageable, less like a fortress and more like a collection of people trying, imperfectly, to do something that mattered. She thought of the girl under the jet, the grease-streaked sleeves, the laughter she'd swallowed because responding would have cost her focus, the logbook taken like it was evidence of a crime she hadn't committed. She hadn't imagined any of it, and she hadn't been broken by it either. Later that morning, the briefing room filled again. Another mission, another set of risks. This time, there was no hesitation when she took the lead position at the table. People listened, not because of rank alone, but because she'd proven, repeatedly, that she understood what failure sounded like before it screamed. The mission wasn't dramatic, no near disasters, no heroic last-second recoveries, just disciplined flying, careful decisions, and a clean return. Those were the ones that mattered most. Back on the ground, as aircraft cooled and crews dispersed, a young airman approached her hesitantly, tools still hanging from his belt, hands slightly unsure. "Ma'am," he said. She turned. "Yeah. I just wanted to ask, how did you know, back then, with Eagle-7, how did you know something was wrong before it actually failed?" Sophia considered the question. "I listened," she said finally. "To the instruments." "To everything," she replied. "The aircraft, the people, the parts no one thinks to question because they look fine." He nodded slowly, like he was filing it away for later. That afternoon, she found herself back in Hangar 6. Same smells, same echoes, different weight on her shoulders. She ran her hand along Falcon 415 as maintenance crews worked nearby. The jet that had changed everything. The jet that had nearly taken a life because someone hadn't wanted to hear an inconvenient truth. It was flying again, perfectly. Captain Martinez spotted her and walked over, relaxed now in a way he hadn't been since that day. "They're assigning me a new aircraft," he said, "but I asked to fly this one last time." She raised an eyebrow, sentimental. "Respectful," he corrected. "It taught me something." She smiled faintly. "It does that." As he walked away, she noticed Colonel Morrison standing near the hangar doors, older somehow, quieter. He approached her slowly, as if careful not to intrude. "Lieutenant Rivera," he said. "Sir?" "I've been reviewing some policies," he continued. "Maintenance to flight pathways, oversight procedures. There were gaps." She waited. "You shouldn't have had to push so hard to be heard," he said. "That's on us." The words didn't erase the past. They didn't need to. "Thank you," she replied simply. That night, Sophia sat alone in her quarters with her logbook open on her lap. She flipped through the pages slowly, stopping at entries that once felt like impossible dreams. Early flights at dawn, crosswinds she'd learned to respect, notes scribbled in margins about mistakes she refused to repeat. She added a new entry. Not a flight hour, not a certification. Just a sentence. "Today I trusted myself, and others trusted me back." She closed the book. Outside, jets launched into the dark, their roar briefly shaking the walls before fading into distance. Somewhere out there, pilots were flying through uncertainty, relying on systems they couldn't see and people they might never meet. She thought about how many lives depended on quiet competence, on people willing to do the unglamorous work, on those who stayed when leaving would have been easier. Weeks passed, then months. Sophia led missions, trained others, corrected gently when she could, firmly when she had to. She made mistakes, small ones, and owned them. She learned which voices needed encouragement and which needed boundaries. She never forgot what it felt like to be dismissed. And she never used it as a weapon. One evening, long after sunset, she returned once more to the edge of the runway. The same place, the same hum of lights, but this time she wasn't alone. Hawk stood nearby, helmet under his arm, gaze lifted to the stars. "Funny," he said. "I used to think strength was about not needing help." She nodded. "A lot of people do. I don't anymore." They stood in silence, listening to the distant thunder of another sortie lifting into the night. Sophia felt a quiet satisfaction, not pride, not triumph, something steadier. Belonging. Not because she'd been accepted, but because she'd stayed true when acceptance wasn't guaranteed. As she turned back toward the hangars, she understood something that had taken years to form. That dignity doesn't arrive with permission. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand recognition. It shows up quietly, in the moments when it would be easier to look away. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.